lot of people are just working for survival.
Yep.
But I hope for a future where work is a creative expression and a fulfillment of a sense of purpose and not something that you're told you have to do to combat scarcity. I remember growing up, all of the adults mentoring me were sort of like, well, you need to go into these majors because then you can get a good job. And it was all from a scarcity mindset. No one was saying, what do you love?
What do you race towards?
I would love like a whole, consciousness shift where little children are cultivated to like do the things that make their heart sing. And it's not a scarcity mindset, like you have to do something so you can barter for your survival.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Love Conquers Fear podcast. I continue to work my way through the telepathy tapes. By the time you watch this or listen to it, season 2 will be done, and it absolutely does not disappoint. It is so good, so comprehensive. The 2 episodes I just finished are all about the power of energy work, yet another decoding of mysteries in terms of how quantum waves and energy works. And, we're all light and energy at our core. So it's really fascinating. There's so much decoding of consciousness going on right now. I've talked about Dan Brown's new book, The Secret of Secrets. I just watched a webinar where he was on with quite a few people that I know. And he was talking about, why he believes now consciousness is fundamental, which is another way of saying non-local consciousness. If you remember episode 2 with Mark Gober, our brains receive consciousness like an antenna, and doesn't mean that the brain doesn't have a very important function in terms of interpreting consciousness. If you have a damaged brain, you're going to interpret it differently. But The Secret of Secrets, I've really dove into, and it's fun. So as I'm recording this, I'm closing out 2025. It's been an amazing year, an amazing soul quest. I've read over 55 books, and I decided to read a novel. It's my 3rd fiction book of the year. I loved reading Project Hail Mary from Andy Weir. Do not watch the trailer for the movie because it spoils about 70% of the book. And I also read Observer this year, which is Robert Lanza and Nancy Kress. Robert Lanza is the famous quantum physicist that covers his theory of quantum physics called biocentrism. And it really takes Everett's many worlds theories to a kind of an infinite degree. And also, talks a lot about the observer effect. And so Observer was the novel that I hope gets made into a movie in terms of what that could mean practically and in a mind-blowing fashion to how it would change humanity if we were able to leverage that observer effect much more directly, which I think one day we will be able to. So it's another fun read. But I really am enjoying The Secret of Secrets. By the time you see this, we'll be into 2026. And if you want to start out the year with a really fun book by one of the world's best authors, Dan Brown, who wrote The Da Vinci Code and many other books, it's a lot of fun. Today, I have a really special treat, and I'm going to dive right into it. So, hey. Suzi,
Hello.
It's good to see you. Yeah.
Nice to see you too.
It's been a while. Always love seeing you. And Alex, what a pleasure to meet you. Just to set up this episode, Suzi, you thought this would be a great way to close out 2025. And I know you're the board chair of Levels. So why don't you cover what Levels is? And Alex, of course, is the CEO. But why did you end up getting involved in this?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us both here.
You bet.
Fun to get to have this conversation, in the context of what you're creating with this podcast and community. So, Alex and I have been on this journey since the beginning. I'm his founding board chair, and I'll let him share in more detail exactly what Level does. But, we've been in an inquiry around how we can, serve and support people who are the most marginalized in society. And we have been exploring how we can use AI to provide access to information and resources to people who are really, really left out. And I think that was one of the connection points is, a lot of the conversation about AI is, really big topics for the mainstream. And this is a small segment of society that's often overlooked. So it'll be fun to talk about who's in the all of abundance for all.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
Alex.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
maybe
it is love conquers fear, in action, what you're doing with Levels. So.
And we'll talk about this, but Level has started by really focusing on people who are in prison, who of course are marginalized, but also it's easy to close your heart and say, well, these are people who've sort of done something wrong. And so, when you think about love conquering fear, what is the fear that we have about people who are on the margins of our society and why they're there, and all those kind of underlying assumptions about that?
Right. Yeah. Well, Alex, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brad.
It's good to get to know you here.
Yeah. I think as Suzi pointed out, it's the whole conversation is interesting because, like a lot of things, it's a metaphor. And you had asked me earlier why I had gotten into this work. And I think the reason that many of us get into the work that we're in is not just this specific manifestation of what the work is on a daily basis, but that larger why. Mm-hmm. And I think what's really interesting about the metaphor of why this conversation is relational to the podcast that you have and to the journey that you're on, and what Suzi just picked up on of what is that fear about, right? What is the fear of the margins, Mm-hmm. And so the work that we do, it does involve education and job development for people who are currently incarcerated. And when you talk about it being some of the people that are the most left behind, it's a very large population. It's not a small group of people. America has 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population.
Wait, say that again.
Yeah, say that again.
I think you should say that again and slower.
we, as a country, and it just speaks to our over-incarceration, and this is really a trend that has only been the past 20 or 30 years. This is not forever with America, but we have 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population.
That's a mind-blowing stat.
It is.
As a data guy, I appreciate that stat, but it's that's
and
really
so there's
gutting.
2 million Americans who are currently incarcerated in prison. To give it some more context, there's 6 million Americans who have a currently incarcerated family member, that they're direct family member. So that's mother, brother, son, parents. And the really amazing part of this, if you want to get into the numbers of it, is the output of this. Because our journey is not just to make more, there's nothing wrong with that, but to make more well-rounded, educated people who are in prison. We're really talking about people thriving after release, right? It's about a better future. There are 600,000 people come out of this system every year in America. So that's a population the size of currently of Baltimore or Las Vegas. So think about that as an output, an outstream of this. And these individuals become our neighbors. You talk about marginalization. These are going to be people that are going to be your neighbors. And so the question is, what kind of neighbors do you want to have? What kind of neighbors do we all want to have? Larger than that, I think what is really interesting is the question of the journey. And I think the journey is a lot of what your work is about, Brett, and the work of this podcast. And a lot of the nature of this podcast has to do with kind of what kind of future are we going to have? What kind of future is there going to be? A future of abundance? And often you look at the past as saying, great things have happened. There's been some darkness, there's been some light, but there has been some darkness. And then the present kind of is a bit of a question mark. What are we doing right now? There's some questions. And then the future that we imagine is a future of abundance. And the reason that I got so deeply into this work is that is 100% of the journey of the individuals that we're serving, the actual people, the humans that we're serving that are sitting on the inside of prisons across America, so often have a past that is turbulent with some good things and some bad things, some mistakes that they made, some ways that society let them down, but clearly some ways that they let other people down and hurt other people. There's no doubt about that. The present is a big question mark. What is going on? What access to information do I have? What are the resources? But the thing that drives the work, and you had said earlier, Brett, that there's no harder job in America than the executive director of a nonprofit. That may be true, but it is a beautiful sort of work because you get to relate to this journey of people. The future that these people see for themselves. Right. This is not Suzi and I going out and all the other people that work on our team and saying, individual, you had a bad past and the present is unknown and you should have a bright future. It's the other way around. It is the other way around. These are individuals that are saying, people, humans, men and women, that are saying, I see a brighter future for myself. I see a brighter future for myself that is not limited by the worst mistakes of the past. Again, their mistakes and other people's mistakes. And that, I think, is what your show is a lot about.
I think it's really cool that you're making the connection between the microcosm and the macro, that, you know, you have been having a conversation about the journey of humanity as a collective, and you're seeing in the individual journey of someone incarcerated, because, you know, there's no doubt that as a collective, we have a lot of things to be ashamed of, right? We haven't made good decisions, and it's kind of like, how are we going to move forward from that? And I think that an interesting piece of this is, like, when you look at, let's just take slavery, for example. Like, what is the way to move forward from something like slavery? Is it kind of punitive in the opposite direction, or how does it really come from love? And I think for people who are incarcerated, who've done, you know, maybe they've murdered somebody, what is the way forward? Is it punitive, and is it always like you can never right that wrong, or is there a path forward from love? And one of the things I have always valued about the content that Level makes is it's not just academically focused. It actually focuses on the whole person and recognizes that, like, healing and abundance, as you've been talking about, it's internal work, it's the being work as well as the technical work. Like, we have commercial driver education and computer programming, but we are also talking about self-expression and creativity and being.
Yeah, you know, I just finished writing my third book, you know, Love Conquers Fear, with the subtitle Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. So it feels really good. It's off to the publisher. And chapter 13 of the book is about the inner journey. And it's essentially about the heart shift that humanity needs to make for us to make it to the age of abundance for all. And I really want to emphasize for all. We're 99.9% the same genetically across the world. And of course, that very much includes the slaves that we had at the beginning of capitalism in this country, you know, pre-industrial revolution. And, you know, that was one of the ways that we bootstrapped our way there. And it's horrible. I mean, it's a horrible fact. And it was prevalent all over the world at that time. You know, 250 years ago, 90% of the world population didn't know how to read. 80% of the world population was in abject poverty. And so we've progressed a lot already, but we have so much farther to go. And I really want to emphasize this stat of 4% of the population of the world is in the United States, but we have 25% of those incarcerated globally. And, you know, people are always a mirror. And so that really hits hard because, you know, you think about it, it's not like Americans are like way more violent than all other people in the world. I mean, that would be a ridiculous assumption because, you know, we live in a very big world of 8.2 billion humans. Like, people listening to this have to say, like, well, what would describe that 25% of all of the incarcerated are in America?
Something weird
Is it something about Americans? No, it can't be, because people are people. You know, the more you globally travel, you know, as we're recording this, I'm about to leave for Bhutan. And you know, we're very well traveled. We're very fortunate in that way, that we have both that desire to travel and see humanity in the eyes all over the world, and B, that we can do that. And, you know, the more I've traveled, the more I've learned we're all just people. We all want the same things. We all are rooted in this place where we want love in our lives. We want to be able to love ourselves and love others, and we want each other to win. You know, there's so much programming we receive about this scarcity and fear-based and zero-sum mindset, and that's not the way that most people are wired. It's just not. It's an algorithmic manifestation to make us think that that's the way things are, but it's really not the way things are.
Yeah. What I thought you were saying was we're not more violent as a society, but I actually think that's an interesting area of inquiry. You know, that there's a book called Nonviolent Communication, but what he talks about in that book is that any kind of act of judgment and kind of blame is inherently the beginning of an act of violence. And I think we have created a society where we don't think a lot about rehabilitation. We sometimes don't even believe it's possible. It's very punitive, right? Like, you've done this, now you're going to get this. And I think that is correlated with the number of people that we have in prison.
Yeah,
sure. Those individuals didn't self-report to prison, and so there is something different about Americans in that we have incarcerated those people. I agree with what you're saying, that it is not purely explained by that there's that much more crime committing. It is the response to that, the underdevelopment of social equity. But look, we also have some of the world's highest rates of addiction and of homelessness, and I think all of these are proxies for socioeconomic conditioning. What I think is beautiful about it is looking at it, like you were saying, both from the macro and the micro. But what really drives me and what inspires me is how much on an individualized basis a lot of people are wanting the same sort of future for abundance across all different types of economic stratification, socioeconomic stratification, and are willing to. It takes a lot to raise your hand constantly in an environment like that and say, I want a brighter future, because how often that is being pushed down. And for those individuals to continually still redo it, do it again and again and again, anyone that they can reach out to, because it takes that level of persistence.
One of the things that's unique about your model that I think we should just highlight is that you don't go directly through the prisons. And that's partly because the culture in the prisons maybe doesn't have always like abundance for all mindset, right? So you go directly to people in prison, and you have direct communication with them. So they write back to you in the completion forms, and you get firsthand stories of people's hope and their dreams and their requests, and often feel like Level is like the only organization that believes in them, period.
It is true, and what you brought up before about the different types of educational content, and we have modules on meditation, that wasn't us saying, again, you individuals,
should do
this.
this.
It was the other way around. It was people reaching out to us. We go out and raise money and create content based on the requests of both people in prison and their family members on the outside, identifying from a direct individual basis, what does that person need for a brighter future, and then you collect that and do analysis on thousands of data points, and then come back with, okay, here are the modules that we're going to go out, one of which is meditation. Of course, then what we do is make sure that we find people with deep lived experience in those areas, so that we're not, again, coming at it from the outside and saying this is what you should do, but instead coming in and saying, let's find people that have walked in those individuals' shoes, which it creates trust, it creates connection, which is great, but it also creates better outcomes, because the people going through programs of that type can believe and see themselves in it, and that's really necessary.
And this is actually the segue to kind of how Alex is using AI, which is, we're serving 2,000 people a year in prison, and we have a reasonably sized content library, but we just don't have the capacity as a nonprofit to really develop a personalized development plan for each individual.
That's true.
But with AI, we could, and we could integrate both their technical learning needs and their personal learning needs, and be able to use AI to scale highly personalized education at a fraction of the cost.
Right.
And to do it without even the participation of the departments of corrections, at least right now, because they talk about fear-based and control-based ecosystems. Those are, I mean, in a place that doesn't even give people internet access, you think they're going to allow in AI access.
Yeah, so what Level does, Level actually puts all the content on 8.5 by 11 paper that is sent through the mail to the correctional facilities, because a lot of the people we serve don't have access to the internet. So, and then Level receives back the mail in a completion form. That's another way Level's going to be using AI, is to be capturing all of that qualitative feedback that we get from people in prison. And actually, we would like to be able to provide them with mentorship. So being able to respond, to 2,000 pieces of mail per year, we don't have the budget to pay enough people. I think we did a math simulation of the millions of dollars it would cost us to try to provide the level of personalized curriculum and mentorship that we could do with AI for the same people.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, it really is, part of the thesis here with the Age of Abundance for All is that AI, quantum computing, robotics, brain-computer interfaces, all of these things exponentially accelerating are going to take us to a place where there's many things that are possible that weren't before. And this is such a great example because you could get the responses back and just, I mean, it's so easy now to just take a photo of that and ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini will just distill it all. I mean, just recently, this is just a minor example, but I take this supplement called Green Vibrance, and it has like a crazy amount of ingredients. I mean, it's something like 200 ingredients.
In 3-point font,
And it's the tiniest font, This is now like at age 53, I'm like, okay, there's no way I can read this, right? So I have to take a photo of it and zoom in, right? But I sent the photo as is, no zoom in, to ChatGPT, and just look for any interactions with any of the other things I'm taking, and it was unbelievable just distilling it all down, and also in like a second. Versus in the past, when we just passed, as of this recording, the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT. That was November 30th. Okay, when I first started using it, I was one of the first users. It would take a while to get a response back, and you weren't going to be taking a photo like this and getting any response back. So it's really an incredible time to enable something like this. And one of the things I've written a lot about over the years since it launched is the reinvention of the education system. Because, first of all, let's just be honest, like our education system has a lot of problems. I mean, the success rates of students is really low, and compared to other countries, another stat comparing to other countries, and we have to figure out a way to make that much better without doing it in an inefficient way. And so AI provides an incredible opportunity to do that. You still need very much the human touch, I think. Because there's just nothing like a struggling child. I remember our youngest was struggling with dyslexia, and the school district was amazing at identifying it and intervening early. And that used to be a major problem in this country, where dyslexics had a very high suicide rate because they thought, well, my brain's broken, I'm dumb. And actually, geniusness runs very high in dyslexics. It's just their brain works differently. And, they were able to intervene. But now with AI, it's really incredible. I mean, just from a personal standpoint, educationally, for $20 a month, which I buy a lot more models than that, but for $20 a month, you could get a ChatGPT subscription. And it's the first time in human history where all content is pretty much available, and anything you want to learn about, you can learn about just every single day. And so my level of education has gone way up since its invention. And one of the things I love about Level is that, there is all this judgment about the incarcerated and all types of things. I mean, humanity loves to separate in all types of ways, Republican or Democrat, man or woman, I'm from this caste, you're from that caste, I'm from this socioeconomic, you're from that, all these things that babies don't care about. You put two babies in a crib and they're just divine, beautiful creatures that just look at each other with lots of love. And that is our core nature, right? That's the mirror. But with Level, they are raising their hand and they're saying, hey, I want to better myself. I need help. I need to believe in that future of abundance, and I need to rehabilitate myself, level up my own education, go out there and be a more productive member of society. And who would not want that?
Well, and that's what you're doing, and that's what we're all doing. That is talk about a core nature. I think that and I love when you bring that up, but it's no surprise. It's no surprise that people are raising their hand and saying, I want a brighter future. That's a very common human trait thing. To look at the things in the past that you wish you could move away from, the uncertainties of the present and the beauties of the future. And I think all of us in this room are doing that. And so it's no surprise to me that of those 2 million people who are currently incarcerated, the same instinct holds, is to say, I'd like a brighter future. We all want brighter futures. And especially when you are really forced to reckon with the worst mistakes of the past. I think a lot of other people don't have to always reckon with the mistakes that they've made in the past. And so this is a situation where those individuals are, and many rightly so, are in a position where they really need to reckon with
I'm curious, what was the moment for you, Alex, where you were like, I've got to do this? Because it's a big commitment to say, I'm going to be a nonprofit leader. Like, there had to be a moment that hit you in the heart hard.
Yeah.
Where you said, I'm going to answer the call.
Yeah. So I moved to Austin 16 years ago and wanted to get more involved in the community here. And I didn't know a lot of people here. And I literally stumbled into a community center where I was a little early for an event. And so I was wandering around in this community center. And in the back was a closed off community library. And it was very clearly not a Dewey Decimal System based library. It was like a library that people had set up. And there were shelves that were it was tucked away. And I just was wandering around and really interested, like you. I'm a sort of data person, and I was trying to figure out the taxonomy of how it was all set up. And there were these notes all around that said all packages must be between, sets of books must be between 1 pound 10 ounces and 1 pound 14 ounces. And I said, what is this? This is crazy. Why would you, there's no money signs anywhere. And so I did what people at the time do, is I took a picture of it and said, I'm going to figure this out later. And I came to understand that it was a community library for a prison book program where community members would donate used books. This was the only organization in the state of Texas, and still is now, 155,000 people in prison just in the state of Texas. This was the only mechanism to get a non-new book to any one of those individuals. Wow. They served 12,000 people a year with no staff. And so I started volunteering there. I volunteered there for 7 years, and it really changed my life. During that time, I corresponded with thousands and thousands of people in prison across Texas. And you talk about that one moment. There definitely are some physical manifestation moments. I can so clearly remember reading the letters that people would write in to say what kind of content, the books that they were looking for. And you could really feel the paper imprint on the back of the paper that the pen had made on the front. And it sounds like such a minimal thing, but it really isn't, because you know that there was another human on the other end that had pushed that paper through the back. And it was almost like a braille. And I could always remember feeling the back of the paper with the ballpoint pen pushing through.
So you could feel like how hard they were writing, like just
really,
almost like pleading, right?
Exactly. And so when that happened, when you do that thousands of times, or at least I shouldn't say when I did that thousands of times, it made a real impression on me. And the moment where it really clicked, because like you both, I'm an entrepreneur, and I had done entrepreneurial ventures before. I'd started businesses before, and I saw and uncovered this tremendous need, because while that organization, and there's a dozen other across the country that do similar work, where they're donating used books into the prison system. It's a really great service. There's more needs than that, because these individuals would be writing in and they would say things like, for example, I remember one person wrote in and said, look, I'm really looking to start a landscaping business when I get out to support myself and my family. Mm-hmm. So they're looking for entrepreneurship books, how to run a business books, and then landscaping books. Well, first of all, there's just not a lot of books at all written that are
Yeah.
about that for
Not
low-income
to mention
individuals.
not in the community
Then
library.
they're not going to be donated,
Yeah.
okay? Because what are the chances of that? Not created at all, because people aren't writing support content for that, for not incarcerated, just lower-income individuals doing that kind of work. What are the chances that we would have it? And then talk about zero sum. It was, if we did have that, and if that did go to that individual, it would not go to the 218 other people that would write in next week asking for the exact same thing. So I said, this is really a publishing and scalability issue. We need to do two things. We need to create it all. So 80% of people are asking for 20% of content, right? It's repeatable stuff that you can make. And to say, number one, this is about custom creating content for this audience. And then number two, mass distributing it, so that if one person's asking for it and another person says, well, we got you, because here, we're a publisher. So it became very clear to me that what this took was just willpower and getting to know the problem really well, making sure that you're rooting that problem investigation in actual human needs, not in a you should do, but a what do you need type of framework. And then the second thing was just the willpower that goes into entrepreneurship, is saying, here's a problem to solve. And so I started exploring that problem more in Texas, and I started talking to other people in other states, and I realized this was not just a Texas problem with 150,000 people incarcerated. This was an America problem with 2 million people incarcerated. And then you and me and a few other people got going.
I'm curious what the moment was for you, Suzi. I mean, because we didn't really talk about your background, but you're an amazing person, amazing entrepreneur. I've been friends with you for a long time. You hold in my mind the favorite episode of mine on Rachel's podcast, our oldest daughter, which is called Radiant Resilience. Like, you really just opened up your heart. You were so, I hate this word because. But you were vulnerable on that episode.
I love that word.
Well,
that's okay.
You know why I hate the word? Because really you were just being authentic.
Yeah.
You were just being authentically you. And the more that humanity would just be authentic. I mean, in this podcast, people have been really worried about me sometimes. They're like, Brett, you're talking about things that you've done that are like taboo, like psychedelics. And I'm like, I'm just being authentic. I'm going to be authentic about what I think about our reality, tools that I've used, et cetera, because I really received a very important vision that humanity has 10 to 15 years to make this heart shift, and that God's working through us to get us to reconcile with the fact that we're almost genetically identical around the world. We need to deprogram, and that technology is going to force us to make that choice. I mean, we talked about slavery earlier. Yes, that was a horrible, horrible thing. There's no justification for treating a human being like that. When the Industrial Revolution came along and automation, how could people even hold on to that? Because technology was forcing them to look more in the mirror and say, well, now you've got machines to do this, and that's part of the narrative people have around robotics, is that there are all these dangerous jobs done throughout the world that humanity needs to graduate from and not go out and do these dangerous kind of mining jobs, et cetera. And no offense to any miners listening to this, because they're doing great work, but it's just, there's an evolutionary shift that we continue to have societally.
I would love
gets
to
us
push
to do more meaningful work.
Yeah, I would love to push it further. Like, I think a lot about right now. I think work. A lot of people are just working for survival.
Yeah. That's right.
And I do believe, just personally, that everybody wants a sense of purpose, and I think people like to create and build. That can be just creating your family, and it doesn't have to be starting companies. But I hope for a future where work is a creative expression and a fulfillment of a sense of purpose, and not something that you're told you have to do to combat scarcity. You know,
Right,
like
right.
I think I have 2 teenagers. I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. So we're talking about grades and college and, you know, what to do. And I remember growing up, all of the adults mentoring me were sort of like, well, you need to go into these majors because then you can get a good job.
Right.
And then you'll be able to pay your bills and you won't end up, you know, homeless and poor. And it was all from a scarcity mindset. No one was saying, what do you love? What makes your heart sing?
Right.
You know, what are your biggest gifts to give?
What do you race towards?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I hope, is not just that robots are doing the most dangerous things, but I would love like a whole, you know, consciousness shift where, you know, little children are cultivated to like do the things that make their heart sing, where they feel they're the biggest contribution, and it's not a scarcity mindset like you have to do something to get so you can barter for your survival.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, that's actually that to me goes to spirituality, because I personally believe, and what I've seen is that we all have a divine calling. We all chose to be incarnated in this lifetime for a reason. And books like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where he survived the most horrific, 4 concentration camps during the Holocaust. What kept him going through is that he knew his meaning, and it wasn't, an overtly spiritual book, but it was deeply spiritual at its core. He wasn't using words like God, et cetera, that I openly use on this podcast. And I always tell people, like, you can call it consciousness, you can call it, the universe, whatever you want to call it is fine. I'm just going to call it what I think that force is that created this reality we're in, and the Big Bang that, who knows how that happened? Like, why was the entire universe at a point of, that would fit on less than the size of a big pin, and had no entropy, and then boom, everything explodes out, and as far as we know, it's completely infinite. If it has a border, that would really be a game changer, if we found out.
And then what's on the other side?
Right, exactly, right. But I'm curious, like, what the heart moment for you was, where you met Alex and you're just like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, Like, being the founding chair is no small feat, too, to say, because I know how much work it takes.
Yeah.
And still here.
Yeah.
And still here, right, exactly, right.
And have had a couple of times when I'm like,
right.
Why do I want to be doing this?
Well, that's every entrepreneurial venture anybody has ever started,
Yeah.
nonprofit or for-profit.
Yeah, I'm just incredibly moved by people who do hard things like this, and that is part of my purpose, is to be wind in the sails for entrepreneurs and social activists who are, Alex, I know a lot of detail about the personal sacrifices that he's making to do this work. And so I feel it's an honor to partner with you. And I think when you set out your vision for me, I was in the middle at that time. I had a software social enterprise, that had been on a roller coaster. And I think I tried to talk you out of it. I was like, don't do this. It's so hard.
Which is important.
Yes, I was trying to really set straight for you, like, because I remember, we were talking about how long would it take to get product market fit, how long would it take to get to financial stability, and you were like,
we still are talking about that.
Yeah, and I think at the time you were like, well, I'm sure it'll just be like 2 or 3 years, we'll get a little startup capital, and I was like, Alex, I think this is going to take, more like 5 to 10 years. I remember telling you about another Austin nonprofit that, that's fantastic, called Eco Rise. And Gina Lamotte, the founder, was a friend of mine. And it took her like a decade to get it to sustainability.
Right.
And so I'd seen many other successful Austin executive directors, Susan McDowell, Walter
me
Moreau.
Directly in my eyes, why, are you crazy?
Yeah, because it takes over a decade to get to sustainability, and Alex just was like, I can't not do this. So I'm like, okay, buddy, I'm going with you, and I think, like, you have to, like, we're not this 10 to 15 year window to get the kind of transformational change that you're envisioning is going to take many people
For sure.
who are completely absurd in what they think is possible. And I think for those of us that can support them and amplify them, like that's us doing our part to try to make that moment happen.
Yeah.
So
George Bernard Shaw. All progress depends on
the unreasonable person,
man
yeah,
or woman.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's so interesting that you say that about me. And first of all, thank you for saying that. And thank you for the support. It's so interesting that you say that about me because that's the way that I feel about the people that we're serving. Like I feel that way about other people. What you just said to me is what I feel about the people that we're working with. I feel like they're absurd. And I feel like what I'm doing is playing support role, And so it's interesting because I guess one man's work is another person's, or one person's work is another person's support, and it depends on the community lens that you're looking at it through.
One of the things I'm curious about is entrepreneurship is so hard, and I'm curious about the letters that you've received that really stand out in your mind, because I can just imagine you with your family, like saying, "Oh my gosh, look at what I received, and this moves me to tears."
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that's so beautiful about what you're doing is that the number one thing that kids think about, and I can say this as a parent, is they really want to see that you're doing something that's right for you and is really aligned with your
really
mission and meaning. And that's one of the greatest things, maybe the greatest thing you can pass along to them. And, my dad had that. And I remember my dad always trying to embarrass me, and he was very good at it because they had, he invented the first halogen fishing light. They had furniture stores, and he would drive up to my school sometimes yelling out the window, "Junk for sale," and just like to everybody on the playground
like,
looking,
"Oh, no."
and just I'd be like, "Oh." And my friends would tell me back then, they'd be like, "I love your dad," and I'd be like, "He's just my dad, right?" Because I'd be like, "Well, really? Why?" And they'd be like, "Well, my dad comes home and tells me all the time how much he hates his job, and your dad is just like always with joy, always having fun." And that's how he lived his whole life. He, when he passed away at age 63, we knew that he had lived a life like he was on vacation the entire time. That he was like flowing in the ocean like a dolphin. I'm just curious for you, those moments where you've received correspondence from these people that are incarcerated that just blew you away.
I think a lot of it comes to what you were saying about the response that you get from traveling and seeing that all people are inherently the same. And in my line of work, there's always a couple of dominant narratives that I look at and I wish were a little bit different. And one of them is people say, "Oh, someone in prison, reading Dostoevsky, can you imagine?" And it's like, why wouldn't they? It's a book and they're smart. Like they read it. And everyone, lots of people read Dostoevsky, lots of people don't. But are you surprised that person did that? I think what blows me away is when people can see what Level is doing, like the long-term plan, like when people see through the work that we're doing, the number of outreach, the number of interactions that they've had with us, and they've seen it change over time, and they've seen new staff come on, they've seen automation, they've seen the barcodes show up on the things, they've seen all these different ways, and people are like, "I see what you're doing, and I think that this is really cool, and if I could suggest kind of coming over here and doing that, because I love what you're doing, and it's really going to help a lot of people, and you have no idea how impactful this is." And I get it. It's when people are kind of like on the journey and they treat me like a human instead of there being this big stratification and they don't look at them as down here and me as up here, or me, us, our whole organization. What really floors me is when there are more indications of what you were just saying, Brett, of that equality and equanimity among people in different circumstances, and that these individuals, these people, these men and women are saying, "I see it, I see what you're doing. Please do more of this, and if you can, do that. And anyway, thank you so much. This is the impact it's having." and that there is this equality of you're over here doing this thing, we're doing this thing. I get it. I see you. When people say to me, I see you, that's when it blows me away.
Because it's a spark of like, it challenges the notion that there's some kind of broken, beaten down, you know, with nothing to give.
No,
they're like, hey, Alex, I have a few ideas for you, and I'm writing it on this feedback form. I remember, so I've brought my work team in to volunteer at Level, and I brought my kids in to volunteer. And, you know, one of the things we did now before we had AI was transcribe the letters into the platform that Alex built. And so you're sitting there typing in the response forms and the open answer fields from all these people. And I just remembered the goosebumps of like, oh, these are real people.
Yeah.
Like you felt, because it's written in pencil, it's written in pen, you're trying to decipher the chicken scrawl. Some people are not writing in very proper grammar, you know, and you're like, oh, this is a person. This is a human being that is living in a box in confinement. You know, it's shocking. Seeing that handwriting, seeing that there's an intimacy there.
Super intimacy.
That's so different than, you know, people in prison, incarcerated people. That I remember I was just like, whoa, you know. And I think for my daughter, when she was doing it, was like, oh my, like, Mom, you know, these are people, you know.
Wow.
It's not just a number. It's not just 2 million. It's not just 25%. It's the letters on the paper. It's the actual
You know,
people.
there's on episode 24, I had J.D. Messenger, who wrote one of my favorite books that I read this year. I read it twice. It's called 11 Days in May. And he calls those goosebumps truth bumps. It's your soul actually telling you, yes, 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 you know, that you're on the right path. And when you get good at reading your own energy, it helps guide you in decision making, because you can kind of feel like, am I in alignment? Is this what I'm meant to do? And, you know, another book that I absolutely loved this year, I've recommended it so many times, is Awareness by Anthony DeMello. And it's all about waking up. And he's like the George Carlin of spiritual teachers, a great one on Audible, amazing. But one of the things he talks about is how flattening language is, and how it just kind of flattens everything to, these are the incarcerated. No, these are human beings. You know, every single person on this earth is a human being. And it doesn't mean that every single human being is someone that wants to be saved in terms of turning their life around. Some people are in pretty bad situations, you know, they're terrorists, etc., and they haven't yet turned towards the light. Their soul wants them to, but whether or not their physical form can get there in this lifetime is a different question. But their soul, if you look at a soul level, they all want to be awakened, and they're all divine at their core. But you know, most people do. Like, most people don't want to be stuck in a circumstance where they had something, either they did something horrific or something horrific happened to them. They're wrongfully incarcerated, or maybe they're rightfully incarcerated, whatever the case may be. But, you know, people deserve a chance, and they deserve an opportunity.
Like little book segments that made a big impact on me was from Sam Harris, his Free Will, and it opens with a vignette of two men committing a horrific crime, and he goes into like a lot of detail about the crime. They kill a family, and then at the end of the vignette, which I had to stop reading the book for a minute to just process that, he says, you know, a lot of people want to claim, I would never do that. He's like, but if you had been born the same way those people have been born, raised the way those people have been raised, had the life that those people had, you would have made those decisions, right? And I think that's the thing that is, you know, challenging, because we all want to like cast our judgment and cast, you know, like, well, I would never do such a thing. But you got to like unwind the string all the way back to the beginning, you know, before you can say, I would never do that. And I think that's a really big consciousness shifting practice, is to be able to have compassion, right? and to really not just put your arm out and be
Yep.
cold and make someone else the other. And, you know, you're saying like, hey, even in a terrorist, I see the goodness, I see
yeah.
the glow,
There's-
I see that fundamental, you know, human possibility. And I think if more of us could do that more often, like even in the, you know, in the grocery store, you see, you know, people speaking so harshly to one another and not even coming from that place. So
Robert Sapolsky is determined follows up on that line of Sam Harrison, really going from 1 second before that you think that decision was made to 100 to hours to days to months, and then even to 50 and 100 years back to really chart the direction of how that every decision gets made. And it really changed the way I look at things. And I think the notion of the justification of free will is a social artifact, so that we can justify what we have done and judge other people what they have done. And I mean, that is one of the biggest places where I feel, and it's super challenging. It's super challenging because what kind of world is there going to be if we say the things that I made, the great that I did, wasn't really me? What if you have to separate yourself from that? Because if you're going to change the attitude of judgment and free will on bad things, you also have to change that on the great things that you did too. So to fully divest yourself from that is hugely challenging, and it takes a lot of love.
I mean, you know, I try to practice it in the tiniest little microcosm at work. One of my mottos as a CEO is that I take credit for nothing and I take responsibility for everything, right? And I find that like it's a practice for me of having my leadership as a CEO not be ego driven. And I think that's a central tenet to this whole, you know, evolution of humanity is we've got to move out of the age of ego that we are like in the peak of it right now, right? Everything about social media, everything is all just feeding the ego. But it's the ego that wants to take the credit and point the finger and say, you know,
I made that decision.
Yes, and I'm better than you lower person, what, you know, however you want to define the other.
Exactly.
You know, John Mackey is a mutual friend of ours, and he was on this podcast a few episodes ago. And one of the things he told me that I'll never forget is he said, just go in and look at every single team member or every single human being that you encounter, and say they have a level of wisdom and so much to teach me. What am I going to learn? And like have that type of curiosity. And he said, you'll find that everybody is so wise, you know, that there's so much to learn. And you know, I mean, think about, like, one of the things, I am an entrepreneur, so one of the things I envision with Level is I envision these people that are incarcerated getting leveled up, you know, pun intended, right? And they get leveled up with their education. They come out now with the type of life circumstance that they've had to get them to the point where they're in prison in the first place, and then have that shift where they really want to better themselves and break out of that prison of the mind, if you will, you know, the programming they received, you know, being told like, hey, you're always going to be this or you're always going to be that. You know, a lot of kids that grow up in very difficult situations are like told they're not going to amount to anything. So they've broken out of the prison of their own mind. They've deprogrammed, they've leveled up. And I think about like what kind of force they would be out there in society.
A great story about this is one of the people, I'm not going to name the person's name because this is a slightly personal story, but a leader who came out of incarceration and has gone on to do tremendous things, just what you're saying, to build whole new ecosystems, a tremendous leader in the field, told a story that when he was let out of prison the last day, a guard came up to him and said, because of you paid for my boat, through my salary of being here,
his
and your kids are going to pay for my kids' boats. Talk about programming and talk about what you have to walk out of. And yet that person said absolutely not and went and changed it. I think that person already was a completely different framework and said, no, we're going to go at this completely differently. You're right. It's a deprogramming. There's a lot of deprogramming.
And that person probably built a different type of boat that they included a lot of
much
people
larger
in
boat.
to teach them.
I'll
all
tell you
how to
this:
fish.
one of the two of them are a lot more successful.
right, totally.
And it's not the guard.
Yeah.
No, this conversation makes me think of Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart. She's a Buddhist nun, and she talks about how real despair and anguish in our lives softens us and actually increases your capacity for empathy and connection. So could we even think about people in prison as having a gift, that if they've truly, processed and worked through whatever, trauma had them be in there in the first place, that they might actually have a capacity for empathy or for forgiveness or for compassion that's even greater than someone who hadn't been through that. Like, I would love to not think of them as just, how do we get them to muddle along and fit in society, but what
thrive.
would it even look like to see that their experience could be a gift for this expanded consciousness.
Pay it forward is a word that is, or a phrase, a term that is used so frequently of people coming out to pay it forward, to pay it to, it's sort of a bat, to take care of the people that are behind them, that they view that they have made it here, they've gotten out, they're gonna go on to great things. And there is such an ingrained tendency to say, now that I am here, I'm gonna help those who are behind me and pay it forward. And so you're exactly right. And I think that already exists. And look, there's some selection bias here. We're working with individuals that have raised their hand and say, I want a better future. And not everyone in the incarcerated population and not everyone in the free world is like that. So we are talking about individuals that have raised their hand and say, I want better things for myself. And those individuals generally are going to be the kind of people that would then say, if I take one step up, I'm going to make sure that I reach a hand out to those that are behind. But it's interesting that you bring that up, because it is we see that a lot in the outreach in the community outreach that we have.
Yeah, and the way that it works right now, certainly if you have a felony, it makes it incredibly difficult to get a job, or a house, or anything. And, there's no recognition whatsoever of like the transformation in being that a person would have had to have to, get to the other side. So,
it's fascinating, and it's a real fascinating manifestation of how our culture views judgment and punishment. And the opportunity that I see, and you bring this up a lot, Brett, is the opportunity for how are we moving towards a new age, and a new age of unlocking different modalities of thinking. And I don't feel like I have the answer to this. The inspiration that I take is from the community that we work in, because I think a lot of those individuals, those people, like you were saying with what John Mackey said, there is a beauty in their vision of what this brighter future would be, not just for themselves, but for culture as a whole. And so as you can try to work and capture and manifest and extend a helping hand in ways that you can, that is my contribution. And I'm lucky to be able to have the opportunity to do it, of exactly what this podcast is about, of getting towards that age of abundance for all. Is about consciousness shift, of thinking a different way about. And certainly it is challenging. It is challenging. I don't do it anymore. We have staff that does it, but every intake person that we take, oftentimes you see people's rap sheets. I mean, it's public information, and you're looking a person up to know where they are and to make sure that you have them properly put in our system. And it is challenging. You have to see the harm and the chaos and the mistakes that people made. And I'm not at all wanting to diminish that. I mean, people, and they're not. People have really hurt other people. I do know that in the free world, a lot of people have hurt other people. So they're not unique for that.
Exactly.
However, there is the opportunity of having love conquer that fear, of saying, I cannot work with that person because of this. And you say, well, what if you had to?
There's just like a level of truth that this calls forth. And, you were saying a few minutes ago that some people have questioned how authentic and vulnerable you've been on this podcast. And I think we're in a social reckoning right now in the United States where our current leadership is saying, we don't want to talk about slavery. We don't want to, shed a negative light on the American brand. So we're going to kind of cover up all these things. And I feel like that's going the opposite way, right? Like we need to have hard conversations, whether that's at a societal level about slavery and structural racism and things like that, or whether it's at the individual level of like, okay, you know, you did something really horrible. Like, we're going to have a conversation about that, you know? And
Absolutely.
it feels like we just don't have a lot of capacity at either level. You know, people are telling you, don't say those things, Brett. Pretend it's not true.
Well, they're saying it out of
protection, probably.
Fear.
Well, they are saying it out of fear, but what they're worried about is that I was going to lose a lot of friends. And what I've told them is, I've gained so many more friends this year, you can't even imagine. I've heard 10 friends now open up to me about their near-death experiences, which last year and every year before that, I had 0 that had ever opened up about that. And literally 10 friends, some of them been friends for 10 to 20 years.
Wow.
Think about how sad that is. The most important
Impactful.
Transformational experience of their life,
They couldn't tell you about.
they were afraid to tell me about because they were afraid that I would write them off as some kind of crazy person or woo. And that's where it's really cool that things like, you know, Dan Brown's new book and the telepathy tapes are getting these out in the open. You know, is there truth to every story? No, I mean that, you know, but I mean, I would have to be a pretty crass person to think that 10 really close friends are looking at me in the eyes and telling me something. I mean, a lot of times they tear up, they start crying when they're telling me these stories and say, oh, they were just, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, that's no way to be a friend to anybody. And so it is a time, I think, where we have to get over our fears and just be authentic. Doesn't mean we're always going to be right, but let's at least
And it doesn't mean it's
real.
going to be easy.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
I'm in a class right now that's on polarity. And one of the topics that's come up is, you know, recognizing that there's both light and dark energy in all of us. And I think that, you know, we want to pretend like we're like 90% light and 10% dark, or maybe even 95% light and 5% dark. But what we miss in that is that like our dark energy is part of our power as well, you know? And I think that that's a part of this conversation of why we've made people, you know, incarcerated people like the other, is there's a lot of dark energy, there's a lot of darkness. And, you know, I think like we can't fully find our greatest light, our greatest abundance without integrating darkness as well and the shadow side, right? As long as we try to put it in a box, pretend it doesn't exist, never talk about it,
Literally,
you know, bar it away, we are not integrated as beings, and we are not going to transcend to like this greater way. So I think that feels counterintuitive to a lot of people, that like the path towards like even greater love actually means you have to come to some acceptance and truth of your shadow parts. You know,
as we're recording this, you haven't yet seen the John Mackey episode because it hasn't gone live. You literally are channeling him right now.
Oh yeah.
This is a big point that he made, is that humanity, the collective human psyche, needs to have a great reconciliation and also embrace the power of forgiveness. You know, he turned me on to this book called Love is Letting Go of Fear, which by Jerry Jampolsky. And it's a derivative work from A Course in Miracles, which he's really into. And I've got a number of friends that are into that and spend a lot of time in study groups. He spent years in that. And it gives you very practical tips on how to let go of fear and allow love to conquer it. You know, you talked about a grocery store. A good example is you go into a grocery store, and let's say that the person that is checking you out is someone that is just a total and complete jerk to you. Well, the quote unquote natural human reaction would be to be a jerk back. But instead, if you act with curiosity, well, maybe their mom just passed away. Maybe something really horrible just happened in their lives. Maybe the customer before was just total jerk to them, and now they're just thinking that the whole way. And he gives this great example of a lawyer that was acting that way to him, and he reacted instead with complete and total love. And the next day, the lawyer was in the third row of his seminar, like went and looked him up, and they're lifelong friends today. Because he said, you were the first person, he felt his power was just constantly treating people like that, as a lawyer. And he was like, you were the first person that ever reacted differently. And so I wanted to see what you're all about. He was like curious, like almost like a science experiment. And it created a heart shift in that lawyer. So let's go into AI a little bit deeper, because I'm super fascinated. I mean, I'm spending almost all of my time on that these days. How do you really look at it practically in terms of embedding it in your solution and leveling up level itself?
The opportunity that we see is for what Suzi was alluding to earlier, is more opportunities for localized and personalized information. And the 80-20 rule goes to show that 80% of our content requests are for 20% of content, just programming type orientation. And that's normal. That's how all general curves go. But you can make a lot of action in the long tail, right? With all of the individual items that people are looking for, individual specific tailored experiences. And that is the way that you were talking about earlier, Brett, about the potential for AI to really help with education, is giving individualized experiences. So we're really looking at the opportunity there. And the problem is a couplefold. One, we can't go into these facilities, and we're certainly not going to bring, they're not going to let us bring computers and internet access. We're not going to bring tech bots into there. So we need to think about the input is going to be handwriting and through the mail. The output is going to be printed material sent out to individuals in prison and to their family members on the outside. So we have that output. And then so the question is kind of what is in between? What can we do? And what technology is there that is within the realm of our accomplishment? And so the first area that we're looking to go into before fully personalized educational curriculum development, that's probably a bit of a heavy swing for us right now. The first thing that we're looking for is personalized career mentorship solutions. So that this is something that a lot of people are really looking for, is what is the work that I did before? Everybody works inside, and they're working all kinds of different jobs that they may not think could be valuable on the other side. Where am I getting out to? Where am I going home to? What employment is actually out there in that area, and how to connect those dots, how to connect the dot from where I am right now to where I could be 2 years, and then a future beyond that.
A person sends in the form, it goes into Carmen, right? And then Carmen is pulling information from what kinds of databases, and then what is Carmen spitting out? I think people would be interested to hear the details.
Interestingly, we already know a lot about these learners before they ever have to contact us again. We know what educational modules they've already been through. We know their test scores so far, so that can help us out with a lot of kind of where they are academically with this experience they're going through. You can take writing level as a proxy for reading level, and this is the case for a lot of us. We write with similarly to how we would read. So we know that information already. We would need a lot of new information. There's things like where people are going home to, when they're going home, what jobs they had before, what jobs they've had on the inside. You talked about this earlier, Suzi. What kind of work would you love to do, right? I mean, people are most likely going to need what they call in this land a lifeboat job, which is that first job that you're going to get in month one to carry you to maybe even upwards of 2 years out to stabilize your economic situation. But what would you love to do after that, right? Because everybody wants to lead with purpose. So getting that information, then we have a process for turning all that from handwriting and bubble letters into machine readable text using AI, and it does a fantastic job. It is all API, meaning it runs in the background. It's all computers talking to computers, so staff doesn't have to do anything like that. And then we have data partnership agreements with some really fantastic organizations. One of them is the largest jobs board for people with criminal records in America. They've called Honest Jobs. They've served 200,000 people. And where Indeed does great work in this too, and they're a local Austin company, and they are they have call outs for employers that are open to hiring people with records, which is called fair chance or second chance hiring. But that is up to the employer to say whether they're going to do it. There's organizations out there that are really even tracking who actually has gotten hired, right? So they're getting this data in to not just say, did the employer say that they would, but did they actually, who got what job where and on what criminal record? So we can get that data piped in. There's a lot of really amazing data from the federal government about training opportunities that are available. And so we can use all that and build what's called a RAG AI system, Retrieval Augmented Generation AI system, to not just troll the open web and say, let me make some stabs at what Jeremy could do, but to say, no, I'm going to first go to these sources of truth for this data, which is real information from real organizations that put out
and it's
data,
localized
and it's
to where Jeremy is going to be
localized.
living.
To come back and then say all that data coming in, and to build a model that then can output and say, here's a 20-page career development plan, starting with today and going into all the things that could, pathways to connect those dots. And that really, to your point, that would not have been possible a year ago. I mean, the technology has gotten that good that quickly to be able to do that at scale. And the other very fun thing about it, I will say, is that the funder community is really open to these ideas. There's a lot of interest in the ways and what they call the intersection of AI and future of work, which is this idea of how do we build the future of employment in America that we really want. And like you were saying, not just from a working to put food on the table, which is quite important, but is there opportunities for
one
more
thing
than that as well?
That will be very exciting for you in terms of this cause is that not only have the capabilities gotten that good in 3 years, humanity has never prioritized anything with as much money, time, and energy. When President Trump announced Stargate on January 21st, 2025, at $500 billion of funding, alongside Larry Ellison, Sam Altman, and Mayoshi Son, that was already more inflation adjusted than we spent on the space race versus the Russians. Wow. It was more inflation adjusted than we spent on the Manhattan Project versus the Nazis and Japanese to win World War II. Since then, there's been about $7 trillion of announcements around the world to prioritize AGI. And so another 3 years in an exponential of the exponentials curve, I mean, it's going to be incredible what level is going to be able to do. So it's probably the single best time for people to invest in your cause and, ride that curve up in terms of the capabilities. And that's one of the things that makes me the most excited about this opportunity for us to enter into abundance for everyone, is that, there's a lot of fear about loss of jobs and all of these things that make sense that there's fears about them. And there's always been these fears in various points in history where there's been a massive technological shift for good reason. Change is hard. Who Moved My Cheese, one of the most infamous books out there, right? Yeah. It's not easy. But on the other side of that is abundance that is unimaginable today, and abundance for, really helping the incarcerated become beautiful, productive, amazing members of society. I mean, we should want that for every human being, period, whether they've ever been incarcerated or whether they haven't been. And, every child, giving every child the ability. There's genius is very distributed. There's all this false sense of geniusness. It's very distributed across humanity. It's just really the cards that you were dealt with when you were born. And there's some, I could go very spiritual on that, where Journey of Souls, by Michael Newton, talks about why people would incarnate into a completely impoverished country, into a war zone. Like, because if you think about it in this lifetime, we're sitting here in America where, we have a lot of abundance that would be unimaginable 250 years ago with $85,800 GDP per person. But the soul is divine energy. The soul is in a kingdom of light and love. And so the soul actually doesn't have any material desire. And wants to constantly expand its ability to grow. So it actually wants to incarnate in different lifetimes, in different challenging situations, as well as not so challenging situations, to see, like, what is it like to be an entrepreneur? What is it like to be in a war-torn country, et cetera? And it's hard for us to even imagine that because we're in this world of form. But anyways, it's a bit of a spiritual diversion.
And we're in a world where we have a lot of judgments about what's a better life, right? Like we think, being wealthy in the West, we're in the better life.
That's programming.
And being, less wealthy in another part of the world is a lesser existence, right? Yeah. So I think that's already a little bit of, the programming that somehow we all won the lottery.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at our obesity rates, our mental health issue rates, maybe we didn't.
It's true.
Right. So
yeah. I mean, it is true that that the only path to lasting happiness is the inner journey. I remember during the financial downturn of 2008, 2009, there was a German billionaire who was worth $3 billion who ran out and killed himself in front of a train because his wealth had gone from 3 to 2. And that was like too much to look at other people in the eyes in that little enclave of billionaires and say, I went down to 2 billion.
I lost 30% of my wealth. I'm so embarrassed.
Right. But it's sad. I'm not trying to make light of that. Like that's a serious level of programming and suffering that person had put themselves through. But it's just exemplary of that. There is no path to happiness that way. Now, certainly you need money as a utility to have experiences and eat and everything else. And the hardest working people in America, I would actually say, are the people working multiple manual labor jobs just to make ends meet. That's a different level of work. And let's hope that in this age of abundance for all, they can all actually do the work that they wanted to do, because there's going to be such a deflationary aspect once we enter into abundance. Like I think the next 10 years are going to be the most amazing capitalistic years. But I think that the crest is that we'll hit this deflationary curve where all of a sudden, let's take energy, for example. If we took 18 seconds of the sun's rays that fall on the earth and we could capture it, we just need the material science breakthrough, we would be able to power the world's energy needs for over a year. 18 seconds. And it's inevitable that we're going to figure that out. Just like AlphaFold led to the breakthrough in protein folding, we're going to have a breakthrough in energy through material science that is unimaginable. And it's going to be like 99.9% of Homo sapiens that did not experience electricity. We're in the top 0.1% of Homo sapiens that have, because we've been around for 300,000 years on this earth. And so that is a very modern invention that, just imagine, Suzi, growing up with no electricity, right? There's countries like that today.
Can I ask you a question related to that? So, I think of you as one of the most successful entrepreneurs I've ever known. And, do you think that you would have been motivated to push the innovation threshold, to take the risks you took, if money wasn't part of it and if it wasn't in part ego-driven?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that. The short answer is yes, I still would have done it. And the reason why is that growing up, I had the unconditional love of my mom, I may not have done it if I did not have that unconditional love, but my soul for sure wanted me to. This is my divine calling, to create a better world through technology. And I've known that since I was young. I wouldn't have put it in the words of the divine because I didn't know how to talk about it. But I had these voices in my head since I was very young telling me this is what I was meant to do. And I didn't know how to process that, but I knew when my mom gave me my first computer and learned how to program with me that that's all I wanted to do from age 7 on. So yes, I would have, because I faced a ton of discrimination growing up in Texas. Like, people were trying to beat me up all the time, calling me a nerd, etc. And I don't have any hatred for them in my heart at all. But pushing through that was not about capitalism, because I was just a kid. And I wasn't thinking like, wow, this is going to make me rich and I'll show them. I was thinking, this is what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to create a better world through technology. I'm
because I love the image that you created of like the next 10 years being this peak of capitalism and innovation. And my fear is that it gets coupled with even more inequality. You know, when we look at Elon Musk and how far out of an outlier he is. So I find myself wondering, like, is there a way for us to benefit from all that innovation without it being coupled with so much wealth inequality?
I think we'll be fine on that front. And what gives me a lot of hope on that front is, if you've never read the chapter on inequality in Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, it's phenomenal. It'll redefine the way you think about that. And that doesn't mean there's not inequality right now. There is, for sure. But what's going to happen, in my opinion, is we're going to crest to this point where we can see abundance for everybody. And we're going to have unprecedented power with these tools. You're already talking about with Level. You have unprecedented power now to level up Level, right, and help the incarcerated. And we're going to hit this crest where we can see it. We can see, like, do we want to end all disease? Do we want unlimited energy? Do we want to have abundance for everybody on this earth? Do we want to realize that we're 99.9% the same? Or are we going to continue to play the zero-sum game? And this is a forcing function moment for humanity. You know, what I talked about it in The Lattice, my science fiction novella I gave you both today, is it's God's final exam. And I don't mean that in such a heavy way to be terrifying, because I don't look at whatever the force is that created this universe to be that. I see that force being rooted in love. That's certainly what I've directly experienced, and what people experience through meditation or near-death experience or other modalities. It is rooted in love, and so it wants us to survive, and it wants us to transcend. And the way I look at it, both mystically and metaphorically, is that is the merger of heaven and earth. Like, just imagine a world where Chad has the abundance that we have today in 2025. Like, just imagine what that would do societally, because Africa is where the future of humanity is. That's where almost all of the children are. So what are we going to do with those? And don't ever underestimate the power of bottoms up, meaning that, yes, there are leaders right now who are playing the zero-sum game. But Gandhi, Mandela, and others showed that through nonviolence, you can get the masses to rise up, and humanity is going to demand abundance. They're not going to allow for inequality that leads to massive suffering. There's not. You know, the amazing forcing function of this period is we're going to invent AGI. That's going to lead to artificial superintelligence. That's going to lead to what I call godlike intelligence in the novella. And it's too good to not have. Meaning, when we discovered fire, we weren't able to play the game
Sure.
to be like, sorry, Suzi, your
You don't
tribe
get
can't
it.
have fire. Like, it's only going to be my tribe. And because your tribe would have been like, we're taking over that tribe, we're going to get fire. I mean, because it's too good not to have. Like, you need to warm homes and you need to cook your food. And that AI is going to be like electricity. It already is, for the people that have it. And it's going to be increasingly more so. We're going to be like Mickey Mouse and Fantasia, being able to manifest, things. If you and I and, Alex could just jump into a time machine and go 100 years from now, and I think we'll make it. I'm 95% certain we make it to this age of abundance for all. We would look at the people 100 years from now, and we would be like, those people are like gods to us today. Like, they would be able to create things from, in their hands, and we wouldn't know what's going on, but it would be some kind of nano, construction device that's invisible that just creates the food they want, or creates,
Well, and I
whatever it
hope
is.
similarly, when you say they would be like gods to us, I hope you would see in them love and compassion and forgiveness and inclusion that right now we attribute to God, and we don't even think humans are capable of.
In my opinion, there's no other way for us to make it. Because with great power comes great responsibility. So if they were not wired that way, they wouldn't have made it. And that's what the lattice talks about, is throughout space and time, there's a point where any race of beings, we're the human race, gets to a point where it has to make that fateful choice, because they get to this evolutionary point where they can manifest technology where the destructive capability is so vast. I mean, this is a bit of a downer, but I'll just ask both of you this question. So, to talk about how pronounced the fear center is of our brain, our amygdala. Today, humanity has 13,000 nuclear weapons. Okay, that's what is ready for deployment right now. What percentage of those do you think it would take to destroy all medium to large size cities in the entire world and send the globe into a nuclear holocaust for a decade? Just what would be your guess?
5%?
Okay, what's your guess, Alex?
0.25.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Nobody's guessed that low, but it's 2%. Okay. So today we have 50 times the amount. Okay. And then if you and I just came to this earth, like, we would say, well, what does humanity call that? Do you know what humanity calls this? There's a term for it.
Mutually assured destruction.
What's the acronym for that?
MAD.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have an insanity.
Yeah, right.
And we're playing psychological tricks on each other with very real weapons. They're not toy weapons.
Yeah.
So we have to make the choice. I don't see any other way, or we will destroy ourselves. And I think that there are lots of things that will get us to make that choice. I do think there's a consciousness awakening going on right now that's getting us to realize the divinity within ourselves, whether you're spiritual or not. Like, you can get to this path through Stoicism, you can get there through Vedanta, which is more of a philosophical path, which I've studied for years, that came out of India. But one way or another, we have to get there, or it's over. Right? And so it's gonna force us to make that choice, because we are manifesting it with more money, time, and energy than anything we've ever done. So where do you two stand in terms of your confidence in terms of us making it? I'm curious.
It's hard for me to separate my confidence from my hope.
Yeah, I know.
I
understand that. Guilty as charged on that front too.
I know that it's possible. I've seen people transform, and I guess, one of the questions in my mind is, how do I think about it non-linearly? Because there's not enough time in 10 years for one by one, linearly, everyone to have the consciousness expansion. So what are the kinds of mechanisms that can create nonlinear expansion?
Right.
And I don't know the answer to that, but I believe it's possible.
Yep. How about you?
I believe pretty deeply that the future isn't predicted; it's designed, and I like to think about what we're doing right now. And I understand and believe in the hope that you put forward there. I heard a lot of "we're going to" and "it's going to." I think we're getting called on it right now. I think we're getting called on it today, and the choices of what we do today and the desire for abundance for all can be manifested today. So I really frame my thinking on not predicting the future, but designing it and doing it on a daily basis, and being aware of both the pluses and minuses that are happening, and with the opportunities and the mistakes, to be frank. So that's where I put my time and energy.
Well, we better wrap this up because I know that I know you have an appointment, and I just want to say, love our friendship. I mean, thank you so much. Thanks, by the way, for helping Rachel so much over the years, and for helping me, and for helping Alex. It's so cool. And Alex, I love your heart. I mean, it's incredible what you're doing, and I just envision, the incarcerated people you're already helping. Just want to give you a big hug, and your whole team. I hope people support this cause, and it really deserves to be supported. And it's never been a better time to support it, because now you got the leverage point with AI to create abundance for all, and that includes, people who are incarcerated. They're people too.
It's a good mirror for this conversation, or maybe like a good accountability check. Like we also have to stay in action, to Alex's point.
Well, I really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Love Conquers Fear. I absolutely loved that episode with Alex and Suzi. If you're watching this on video, you can see that I'm wearing a different shirt. And normally for a retake of an outro, I would put the same shirt I had on. But I thought I would just tell a funny story. So the reason that I'm taking this retake is that during that outro, the light in here was just going completely nuts and just flashing. And afterwards, Suzi showed me a tattoo that she has, and her tattoo says lightning on it. And we both had a really good laugh, and I referenced the Celestine prophecy. And there it was, once again, the divine was poking in, making us realize that there was something that we hadn't covered, which was, her real spirit force of nature. And Suzi definitely is a force of nature. I've known her for a long time, and what she's been able to accomplish in her life and the level of passion that she's exuded has just been off the charts. I'm super proud to know her as a friend. And so I thought I would record this outro with just being honest about what happened in the room. This light was going crazy, and we found out that there was a reason that it was. I hope all of your new year is off to a great start, and stay tuned for many more exciting episodes of Love Conquers Fear. Really appreciate all of your support.